Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the encounter book Icewind Dale Expanded, designed by Azzael Ulbrinter, Zeuch, and Kathleen Harrington for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, please reach out via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. So last year, I reviewed a product by Zeuch, which was Encounters in Icewind Dale. And one of my, he's done a whole series of these encounter books, which have all done a really good job of expanding on the 5th edition campaign books and providing additional encounters for you to run while you're running those adventures. That one, however, was only generically tied to Icewind Dale and not specifically tied to Rime of the Frostbane, and that was one of my complaints because I was thinking, well, gosh, Rime of the Frostbane had just come out a couple months ago. It seems obvious that if you're going to have it in Icewind Dale, it should be tied to Rime of the Frostbane. Well, squeaky wheel has received the grease, because this, in fact, is basically what I wanted the first time, which is an encounter booklet that is specifically designed to be run with Rime of the Frostbane. In other words, it expands on that campaign and offers some additional scripted encounters and events that can occur pretty much all in chapters 1 and 2, which is a complaint of mine because there are more chapters in Rime of the Frostbane, but those are the two biggest ones. Those are the two open world, chapters. There are going to be, by the way, some spoilers for Rime of the Frostbane in here in terms of the overall plot and structure. So if you're for some reason going to be a player in that campaign, then obviously don't be watching this review or be reading through this book, because there will be spoilers for that. I think it's a good encounter book. It offers 15 of these encounters. It's most of them have full grid battle maps included, which is awesome. The quality does range, which I think we have enough time to go through, and I'll give a quick thumbs up or thumbs down for all of them. But in general, I was pretty impressed, and mostly what I really liked was the direct references and how it points to things that are in Rime of the Frostbane. In other words, NPCs that show up or factions that show up. The fact that, for example, the Zentarum are a whole thing in Rime of the Frostbane, and yet there's really nothing you can really do with the Zentarum in there. Just kind of mentioned for the fact that, Speaker Nearthan Targos is kind of undermining one of the other speakers, but there's no real quest chain or anything there. And this one kind of tries to provide some of that content, which is awesome. That is a huge thumbs up for sure. Also, really attractive layout and design, very professional looking, which is something I've expected from this publishing team of doing all these different encounter books. A lot of good color schemes, maps, nice border, everything in there. And the introduction immediately put any of my fears at ease, because the designers correctly point out, hey, here are some of the shortcomings of the Rime of the Frostbane campaign. And one advantage for me reviewing this is that I am currently playing through Rime of the Frostbane, so I'm very familiar with the shortcomings and weaknesses of that campaign, despite still enjoying it. One thing that designers point out is that it was advertised as a horror campaign, and it's really not. There are certain elements and areas which are a little more horror inspired, but overall it's not really have that dark, oppressive, dangerous horror theme that people might have thought going in. Also, the fact that the starting quests are kind of a mess. One of them is really just lame and nothing's going on, and the other one is really potentially very deadly and kind of messes up on not even having an investigation for a serial killer thing, and the fact that it's these separate storylines that have nothing to do with each other. So that's a lot of work to be done. I don't think this encounter booklet necessarily fixes all that, nor is it really even designed to. This isn't like a life hack, book for how to fix Rime of the Frostbane. If anything, I should be releasing one of those, because you can watch my campaign to see how I've been fixing all that. But what it does do is, again, provide those tie-ins to certain areas. It's got more content for the Dwerger, got more content for the Zentarum. Has a really cool way of using Valin, who's a character that just randomly shows up halfway through the campaign. You can use her in these different quests and her kobolds and all that. So from that point of view, I think it does a really fun, cool job of including all that information from Rime of the Frostbane, and really act like a proper expansion that fills in a lot of these holes, basically these, I don't know if I'm going to call them mistakes or not, but stuff that could be improved from Rime of the Frostbane. All right, so let's give a brief overview. Let's see if I can do this in a reasonable amount of time for 15 encounters. These range anywhere from about half a page to a full 2 pages, And as you can probably guess, the ones that are really short, I'm not a big fan of, and the ones that are longer and more involved, I think are a lot better. I really like my encounters, especially if you're going to release an encounter book, to have actual proper, like maybe even a proper step or two, or at least have some kind of cool thing happening in there, and less about, hey, it's just you go here and fight this thing or this mini like dungeon or lair or something. That's less interesting to me when there's nothing going on, but sometimes that's, all we want as players. So the first two, I believe, are designed for straight up level 1 or 2, and the designers mentioned the fact that you can actually begin your campaign with either of these quests instead of using the Chwingwa or the Frozen Heart one from the serial killer, which is good because I never use any of those. And there's been a lot of complaint about those. I agree. In my campaign, I just started with Foaming Bugs, which is one of the 10 Town Chapter 1 quests. This one, Apprentice Necromancer, does a great job of introducing Valen, which is great because she's a very important NPC. It has a cool introduction with a severed hand crawling along the tavern, which is a great inciting incident to work your players up to doing something. They do some research, they talk to some townsfolk, and they realize that a local tomb is being plundered. And it turns out Valen has had parts of her spellbook stolen, which is a really cool reference. The fact that she is a necromancer who animates dead. This little, small-time necromancer is basically just stolen from her and is now trying to get bodies to make some undead minions, so the players have to go and basically stop him and defeat him. But a really good way to introduce Valen, and I like the idea of it starting off with just this severed hand crawling around. Body Snatcher really goes hard with the horror, and you end up investigating this woman who's really worried about her husband hasn't been acting normal very recently, and they woke up one day and found a dead body in their room, which was obviously cause for concern. Ever since then, the husband's been acting weird. And the party does some investigating, and they talk to the husband, and he wants to meet with them privately, which is weird. And then, of course, it turns out that, not of course, but it should be still a shocking twist. It's an intellect devourer is involved, had been in the skull of the guy who fell over dead and killed the husband while they were sleeping and took over the husband. And it's become a creepy, body snatching the thing kind of situation. I like it in terms of it does a really good job of adding to the dark horrorness of it all. On the other hand, it's a little random that there's a intellect devourer just kind of hanging out in Icewind Dale somehow, but it fits the theme of what it should be, which is a very dark, bleak place where a lot of creepy stuff happens, and this kind of stuff can easily happen under people's noses in these frontier towns. So for that, I think obviously I would give both of them thumbs up. I do wish that the campaign book itself had worked out more than that. If they were like a whole thing about intellect devourers taking people over, if it did more with that, in other words, because we have a little bit of a mind flayer tease in Rime of the Frostbane. I think intellect devourers is a great way of adding to the horror. Frozen Heart is awesome because it uses the sacrifices that's happening in Rime of the Frostbane, which is every town. The Rime's been going on for 2 years now, and the towns are they're all reverting to oral worship, and they're literally sacrificing. Some are sacrificing warmth, some food, and some are actually sacrificing people. And this does a direct tie-in to the players because they first meet a young boy of 10 years old, and he's crying about his father has been, cast out, and they have to go find him. So they end up making survival checks, and then depending on how well they do, they can find him alive, they can find him dead, they can find him surrounded by a bunch of crag cats, and you have to fight them. And then that ties into the whole fact that they can't go back to town because the town voted to, he won the lottery of being kicked out, and then that's the way the players learn about the whole lottery sacrifice system. That is a great, awesome way of introducing that. Had I been running the lottery system in my campaign, because I did my rhyme a little bit not as lengthy, I would absolutely be using this, and it perfectly uses, by the way, social. You've got the role-playing aspect with the kid, and then hopefully find the man alive. Exploration, you're going through and searching for him, you're going to make those survival checks, and combat with the possibility of coming across those crag cats and having to save him. All three of those within one little encounter area. That is a huge thumbs up. I absolutely love that idea. Headless Hero introduces a bunch of basically racist assholes in Tourmaline, and this one calls back to what I mentioned earlier, which is Speaker Nerth in Targos is trying to undermine the authority of the Speaker in Tourmaline, and that Speaker happens to be a half-orc, and so he's got this one dwarf with a grudge whose, I think, son was killed by another half-orc, and because he's just a racist asshole, now he just hates half-orcs, and he's damaged the statue hero, which is supposed to represent, inclusion and diversity and everything in the town, and how we're all post-racial and everything. And essentially it's a lot of social and exploration and trying to learn about the the grievances between these different groups. And what it actually comes down to is that you learn about the Zentarum, who have basically instigated this whole process and are kind of exploiting the situation here, which calls back to another encounter, which is used later in this book, 'cause it's alphabetical, where the players can actually go bust down the door of I think it's a tavern in Targos, and actually, speak to the speaker, and then find out that he's been hiring all these Zentarum and everything, and he is Zentarum. That's a big twist, is like the whole authority figure in Targos is actually Zentarum. So also does a really good job of blending into the Zentarum thing, especially if your players want to explore more of that, or you, the DM, want to explore that. So I think that does a pretty good job. Helping the Herbalist, probably the first one that I am down on. This is one that's only half a page. I guess it kind of replaces the Twingwell one, but there's nothing really going on here. You basically just go out and pick some plants for somebody, making some potions, and a bunch of Chwingas appear, and Chwingas, I cannot say that fucking word, and you just kind of meet them, and it's a whole little silly thing. There's nothing really going on here. Rebranding Town is weird. Rebranding Town is at Dugan's Hole. You can meet with the speaker and offer to, or she wants to basically sell you real estate and try to make her town more, not a piece of crap at the end of the world. And the odd thing is there's no real drama or conflict or events there. It's just a money sink. If they want, the players can spend thousands of gold, in order to construct these massive buildings, which feels very thematically odd because it's supposed to be very dark. Everybody's tightening their waistbands and bootstraps and everything for what's coming on. It feels weird for a time to do that, and there's no event or conflict to make that interesting. There's no rival construction guild or drama with parts missing or anything. It's just, yeah, do you want to do this? Okay, let's do this. So I thought that was very bizarre and doesn't really fit anything very well. Snake Schemes is the follow-up from the Headless Hero, where the players can go to Targos and they meet down basically the Zentarum headquarters and realize how thoroughly the Zentarum have infiltrated Targos, and the fact that the Targos leading authority, including the captain, are all basically in on it, which I think is a really cool twist. So I love that really exploits the whole Zentarum faction and works as kind of a 1-2 with the Tourmaline one. And in fact, if the players do the quest in Tourmaline, which is a great one, the Beautiful Mind one, that can bring them back to Targos to then do this little bit of a event quest to deal with the speaker and the fact that there's much of Zentarum, and how do you root that out if it's basically all over the authority figures. So those are specifically, the whole thing is organized into 3 parts, and that one is specifically for part 1, or for chapter 1, which is levels 1 through 4, and specifically all those events take place in town. Some of them, it doesn't matter which town it is, whereas others were specifically like that one that was Tourmaline and Targos. They do kind of matter on the towns. And then we have part 2, which is chapter 2, which is the wider Icewind Dale kind of open world exploration. Similar to chapter 1, where it's got all kinds of, it just throws a bunch of content at you. You can choose which ones you want to run or do. This one, same thing. They just take place in the wider tundra area, and they are designed for, I think, late tier 1, early tier 2. I want to say levels 4 through 6 or so. And they kind of range... let's go over them. So Battle of the Lycans, this one kind of comes out of nowhere. It's about werewolf factions that are battling each other, and they've got some drama there. It's more exploration and socializing than it is combat, although obviously you can have combat. I just felt weird because I don't think the werewolves are mentioned anywhere else as even being any werewolves in Remember the Frost Maiden, so I'm not sure how that one fits very well. Essential Supplies is a classic, you go somewhere and you have to fight a bunch of dudes, in this case orcs, but I think it works because you come across the bloodied remains of a plundered caravan that was bound for 10 towns. It's designed to try to help them, get out of this crisis. And you at the same time, a bunch of 10 towners have also been looking for it, and you actually meet with them. It's kind of an interesting aside that you can gain all these really weak allies that you should probably leave behind and not have them with you. And you fight a bunch of orcs. It's fine for what it is. I wish there was a little bit, even though it's actually pretty long. I wish it was just actually a little bit more. I wish there was a chance for the orcs to have some kind of complication where the orcs are also in dire straits and they need the supplies. Maybe they've got family with them and they've been displaced. Instead, the designer goes out of the way and says, no, this is an offshoot of the mini arrows tribe, and they're just all evil assholes and they're just plunder this area. That's less interesting to me, even though it's fine if you just want to go show up and fight and kill a bunch of orcs. That's, sometimes that's all we want to do. But I think it was a missed opportunity to create some more interesting dilemma, because I feel like the rhyme has affected everybody equally. Even more, monstrous humanoids, I feel like, would still be oh yeah, we had to plunder this because, we're in bad shape. We're all freezing and dying. And maybe it eventually starts a fight, but you find out, oh, these guys are also, just dying. It does point out, interestingly, it says the adventure provides many instances to link the character's secret background. There's not a single orc in the adventure to link with the orc stone character secret, which is one of the secrets players can start with. I think they can like summon an orc chieftain out of a magic rock or something. I don't think that's correct. I think there actually is orcs in Realm of the Frostmaiden. I meant to look this up before the review, but if you look at the end of the Lost Spire, I think there's a random encounter with a group of orcs as you're leaving the Lost Spire, which the Realm of the Frostmaiden does this several times, which I hate, which is when you're leaving a dungeon, in other words, the falling action, you've already done the thing, then you run into like another monster. In this case, you run into like a tribe of orcs, and it was what I was saying. They're looking for shelter. They're not looking to like beat up or fight the players or plunder things. They're just trying to get in from the cold and meet up, and that's the kind of moral, interesting dilemma I was hoping that this one would use. So I think it's fine. I just wish it went a little bit more, had a little bit more of an interesting complication to it. Kobolds Run Amok is a little worse to me, even though it uses Valen, which I like again. But this time, she's basically lost her kobold. She's got like, these kobold minions with her. And the funny thing is, in the book, like some of them are undead, so she just, raises them up as undead when they die, and they just, they're loyal minions again. In this case, some of her kobolds have defected and joined a warren, and she hires the players to go bring them back. And it's just a gauntlet of attacks trying to fight against these kobolds who somehow have trained polar bears. So the warren is already established. A few kobolds go there. It's not just those kobolds who suddenly train polar bears, but still, the fact that you can train polar bears are fucking crazy, powerful, and strong. And they're like rolling down like giant snow boulders at them and riding on polar bears and attacking them. It's really crazy. And then you get to the end, and the kobold, her ones that had defected, basically say, "Oh, we'd rather join you and not Valen." So story-wise, it creates a really difficult complication because Valen is still a very important NPC who you really don't want to piss off for the context of the story because she's got all the important information later on. So I would be very worried about running this one. Even though the premise of the little mini encounter seems kind of cool as a mini dungeon crawl with, boulders going and kobolds riding polar bears, even if I think it's a little much. But interesting idea. I think the orc one I would give a thumbs up one, and the kobold I would probably give a thumbs down. Wild Whale is weird. You just come across, you get a tip that, hey, you should go finish looting Icing Death, which was a dragon that died at the hands of Dritston, a whole nother campaign. And you get to an area and there's a flying sperm whale flying around, just a awakened creature, which, the awakened creatures are very odd in Realm of the Frostmaiden. That is a thing that happens, so that's a good callback. But it also is almost incongruous with the horror theme. How do you do talking animals with horror? Very not well, I think. And in this case, the whale, for some reason, flies and is neutral evil. So it's not even a question of like you talk to this thing. It's just coming at you, and you just have to fight this flying whale as a random like monster encounter, seemingly out of nowhere. So that one feels very, very random to me, even if the idea of a flying whale is kind of fun. But it almost feels like something that you should encounter in the Feywild instead of in Realm of the Frostmaiden. Witching Hour is a fun use of a Buer hag. And an interesting call into the Dwerger. You end up finding a bunch of dead Dwerger everywhere. This is almost the replacement of the serial killer quest. And there's always a little snowman near them, and through a series of investigations, you realize the snowmen are actually snow golems, and the snow golems have been animated and created by this Buer hag, who you can then go after, and then she will give the quest to mention, like, hey, these freaking Dwerger are going everywhere. They're because I think the idea is she's got Chardalyn, and she's sending them out to people to drive everybody crazy because Chardalyn's very dangerous, and the Dwerger are stealing the Chardalyn. So it's a funny way for you as the DM to tell the players, hey, not only is there Chardalyn everywhere, but there's Dwerger everywhere also, and you can do some investigative work, and then when you go meet the Buer hag, she's like, hey, also they've set up this freaking outpost near Caer Konig, which is the Dwerger outpost quest. So it's an interesting way of introducing the Dwerger element and including the Chardalyn element and including a Buer hag, which is a neat idea, and it does mention the fact that, hey, if you want, you can change it to use the sea hag from Toil and Trouble, which is the chapter 1 quest from Easthaven, in order to even use the same hag and have that hag be a quest giver instead of an enemy. That's all very, very interesting, and I think it works pretty well for what it's trying to do. So I would have to give that one a thumbs up. Wrath of the Giant is awesome. This one is you come across a polar bear, kind of a young polar bear who's wearing armor, which is very weird. And it turns out that polar bear had run away from a battle with a giant. The giant trains polar bears and has them fight with him, and then they fought a dragon, and the polar bear just cut and ran. And so the giant is looking for his polar bear to like punish it, basically. So it creates a very interesting social, moral dilemma situation for the players because, of course, the giant shows up half an hour later, and depending on what the players did with the bear, that has a big consequence with the giant, you could end up, and depending on how well you acted with the bear, are you, did you try to shush it off, or are you trying to feed it and comfort it and love it? And then, it might help you in the fight against the frost giant, which is pretty neat. So I know that one is a really neat way of including frost giants, having social exploration, role-playing moments, combat, all of that in one encounter. So really good idea with Wrath of Giant. Thumbs up on that one. Part 3, Quest for Ethereum. I was hoping that we would get more content for other chapters, and not only do we only have 2 quests in this part 3, but one of them doesn't even take place in Ethereum, has anything to do with Ethereum, so I'm not sure why it was even organized that way. It should have been organized in part 2 because it's just a wider world of Icewind Dale. So I have no idea why Divine Affairs is even in this part. Divine Affairs is you get to the Sea of Moving Ice and you meet a quest-giving NPC who says, hey, we're priests of Umberlee, and the priests of Auril had stolen a relic from us. Please go get it back. And oh, by the way, it's across the entire region down by like East Haven near the mountains. So don't ever give your players a fetch quest that takes place across the entire region, by the way. That doesn't seem like a great idea. I was hoping at least to be at the Sea of Moving Ice because that'd be kind of chapter 5-y, but no, we're back to chapter 2, just doing Icewind Dale. And then for some reason we don't get a map here, and it's just a simple combat encounter. You show up and you fight the temple guardians. There's a little bit of a social issue because the guardians are like, wait, no, that Umberlee was given to us. It wasn't stolen, and you players can decide what to do from there. But if they just want to take it, they'll have to fight the battle and take it. So it was disappointing because I thought it started off good, but then didn't really go anywhere satisfying for me. Weave Monsters is an interesting idea that actually does take place in Ethereum. It's our first quest that takes place outside of chapters 1 and 2, first and only, unfortunately. Where you find this machine that you can attach yourselves to, and you open up this portal which you can summon these kind of magical creatures to, and then you can earn these creatures, and actually you can evolve them almost Pokemon style. It feels very, very weird, although the fact that you can get these crazy powerful creatures is really ridiculous, and then it opens the gate up for other monstrous creatures to come through. It's an interesting system, but on the one hand, I think it's cool as somebody who's a big Pokemon fan, and this might be an interesting introduction. One, I would limit this to like the area they were in, like maybe if there was like a, I don't know, Pokemon arena type thing and they had to fight with monsters, I think that'd be cool, but I don't know about giving them permanent allies. Although it says when they reduce to 0 hit points, they just disappear and they're gone, so you've only got them till then, and you're kind of near the end of the campaign here anyway. And B, it doesn't have anything to do with Ethereum, really, other than the fact that there's all kinds of crazy magical shit in Ethereum, so I guess you could introduce everything. But in terms of any callbacks or references, we suddenly drop the ball, and there's really nothing that direct... Well, except there's one, in order to destroy to close the gate, you have to destroy these wave devices at the Anvil of Destruction, which is technically in Ethereum. That's the only real reference or callback. So unfortunately, I was disappointed that all the content is really solely focused on chapters 1 and 2. But otherwise, not all of them I enjoyed. As I went through them, you could see there were definitely a couple of thumbs down in there. But for the most part, I thought there was some really good ideas, and I really appreciated the fact that there was some great references here as well. Let's go over my pros and cons for Icewind Dale Expanded. Over a dozen encounters with a variety of type, location, and level range. So if you're not familiar with the encounters series of supplements, they do a really fantastic job of making it easy to read, very well organized. The encounter level, the encounter type, the location, and a brief 1-sentence overview are all at the very beginning. You get a background, you get the actual encounter, and then at the end it mentions here are the possible outcomes depending on the choices that your players made, and then any rewards that are involved. Basically, the entire... That also plays another pro of mine, which is the professional layout and design works very well, but I do like the actual specific organization of the encounters. Very well done. Pro, excellent tie-ins, references, and callbacks to events, factions, and NPCs to help expand Rime of the Frostmane. Unlike the encounters in Icewind Dale Expanded does do a good job of having a lot of the quests directly reference different factions, NPCs, events, everything I just mentioned, with Rime of the Frostmane's ongoing storyline of, having Zentarm in there, having the Dwerger, having the oral sacrifices at night, having Valen Harpel be a major NPC. All these elements are included here, which is very nice to see. And pro, full-color battle maps for nearly every encounter. The only one that I really thought was missing was the temple one, because I thought that should have been we should have gotten a temple battle map for that. But otherwise, we got battle maps for all the ones that really felt like they needed some kind of battle map. Some of them, they're just generic out in the tundra battle maps, and we get those maps, which is very cool. Thumbs up for that. Cons. Only one encounter takes place after chapters 1 and 2. Now, yes, chapter 1 and 2 are very big. That requires a lot of content. And chapter 2, even though it is chapter 2 out of 7, you can actually run chapter 2 throughout the entire campaign, because it's basically just, hey, here are major, locations or quest events that are in the wider world of Icewind Dale, and until you get to like chapter 6, where you're actually in like the end game going towards Ethereum, you can be experiencing all of those. So technically, yes, you can use those quite a bit around, but still, we had nothing for the Sea of Moving Ice, nothing for Grim Scala and the Island of Solstice, nothing for the Caves of Hunger, and only one quest for Ethereum. And the one quest for Ethereum, I didn't think necessarily, even though it's an interesting idea with the summoned monsters and the evolving thing, it doesn't necessarily have any of the nice tie-ins to what's actually going on in Ethereum. So to me, that was all very disappointing. And then my other con is there are a few uninteresting or overly simplistic encounters, the helping the herbalist, rebranding the town, the wild whale. A lot of these just didn't feel very interesting or clever or had good, tie-ins or didn't quite fit the theme. Like, for whatever reason, they don't quite work. But I would say at least 10 of the 15 encounters are very, very well done, and I would overall very much recommend it. Final verdict: with mostly well-designed quests, proper horror themes, and satisfying references, Icewind Dale Expanded is almost a must-have expansion for Rime of the Frostbane. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.